wall design. A lot of you probably would recognize this, being in the industry. This is called the Four Seasons. And many manufacturers use this design, had this design. And this is done on linen. This is an original steel engraving, done on linen. It's a very, very popular design. The idea, this is about 1810, 1815. The idea of the walls was to tell a story. There are, the manufacturer, or I can show you, this is a very interesting fabric too. The manufacturer of the toiles made this fabric. This is a very historic fabric. This is the story of the history of fabric making in France. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this design. This is a very important design. It's got little illustrations, like the Four Seasons illustration did, showing all that happens. Here, there's a vat that they're dyeing the fabric. Here, the fabrics are being. This is interesting too. They were all dried outside. They were festooned outside over on a long festoon up at the roof level, so they dried. Here is a hand press. Here's a platen press there. The guy's printing by hand. Here the skeins of fabric are laying out, drying. Again, I'm not sure how this is not very commercially interesting, but historically it's extremely interesting. First wallpaper, believe it or not, the very first wallpapers in Europe, as we understand, were actually flock wallpapers. And flock wallpapers were made because the people wanted their houses to have a feel of rich fabrics and also along with the wood carvings. So what the wallpaper manufacturers did was to create this flock wallpaper utilizing real finely chopped wool, and they used varnish, oil, or anything you put your hands on that could stick the stick the wool to the wallpaper. This was very, very popular, and I thought this came in from what I had studied before. It came in the early 19th century, but flocking was one of the first wallpapers that were made, because the idea was the manufacturers wanted to create the fabric look for the walls, because these guys couldn't afford tapestry, they couldn't afford anything like that. So that's what they wanted. They even put it on their borders, as you can see here. 40. This is really a beautifully done piece. This is hand block printed, cut out of wood, but it's made to resemble actually woodwork. These were pretty much made for hallways in a house, and because they wanted the feeling to be very, very rich and very sophisticated. So there were no florals or anything like that. A lot of times they were also, many architectural kind of wallpapers too were made. I can show you, this is a little bit later, this piece I want to show you here. This dates about 1840. This is really a beautifully done piece. This is hand block printed, cut out of wood, but it's made to resemble actually woodwork. Nice period color too. This is another wonderful example of wainscoting. Wainscoting too was a very popular idea, because again, the manor houses all had their rooms wainscoted all up to the about 40 inches up above the floor, and so the wallpaper manufacturers actually created and made the wainscot work as well. There's many different types of examples that I have found, that I have studied. This is a very wonderful example. And that's all block printed. But this too is on the original handmade paper. And you can see how the paper was adhered together, glued together. You can see the actual samples of the small samples of paper on this one, which that's really a very interesting way to show how they were actually put together. And then also there was a problem with this is the large border, and we put and this is a stripe that coordinates. So we would have probably had this little field here. We would have probably had this little design here too, and probably a larger geometric, and then probably a ceiling paper as well. working with all this, matching all these colors. This is a William Morris design. Some of you may recognize. I think it's called Chrysanthemum. And he named all these designs. And there's a company in England that we talked to many years ago who has all of William Morris's originals. And they have a book, and they've had the book out for many, many years, of block printed papers with his original blocks. And the best designs out of that book, they put together into a surface printed collection with period coloring as well. And I think that's still in the market. This is an original block printed paper by the William Morris Company. Also, we're interested in recreating the woodwork and the carved wood that were in the noblemen's houses for the other people too. So they too, their artists too, created this wonderful art form. And this dates to about 1790 to 1810. All these documents I'm showing you, you can certainly look at later. They're all original documents. All of them are block printed or hand painted. By the end of the 18th century, paper making became quite a craft. No longer were the papers made with, let me show you. The papers were made on the smaller, well here, this is a good example. The papers were made on a smaller scheme, and they were made by hand. They were made flat, like this, out of old scraps of wood, old scraps of fabrics, and then they were pasted on the wall. And then when the homes got larger, as the paper making industry became more sophisticated, they, especially in France, these guys decided, well, gee, what we'll do, we'll take these scraps of paper and we'll glue them together. So they glued them together to make a real long piece of paper. Still handmade papers, still pretty much the same width. And then it wasn't long after that the paper making industry became even more sophisticated and actually made papers in reams designed students, because the colleges have very little information on wallpapers in their curriculum, and we need to get that back in there so they when they graduate they understand that wallpaper.
That's what he was similar to. It soaks it through. It's metallic, but in texture.
We did that on commercial. The only problem is that it can only be done by commercial at 27 inches. So I don't think that she has to the way the glass speed has to fly in the machine, so we have to cut it first.
You want a textured paper? Well, we may have something like that.
Well, you know, and then we did a flock one for a casino in Las Vegas.
Want to use that? Well, that's not see, we don't have that on the market. Somebody's going to ask for it.
Oh, yeah, you're right. This video ain't
John has to teach you how
How to pack?
You don't want to, I would think you would know how to pack them. Okay, here we go.
Wow. You know, I
Which is one reason why the surface work is more expensive now, because it's very labor intensive.
And it's still done here in the U.S.
Oh, yes. In Europe.
Oh, that's great. It's done down there.
Yes.
She's using some.
However, about 98% of our manufacturing is done. The only thing that's not done are the handcrafted examples, and they're done out in Chicago. We have a small studio out there that does
That's great to know.
It would have been cut out of a block of wood, and then the colors would have been laid in by stenciling in the 18th century, or hand painted inside of the.
This is a contract. You see a piece of wallpaper, you don't realize how much.
Yes, in that manner. And I went in there every day since when he learned something new.
This is how things traditionally were made. That's a block print because they would be held like that, printed down on the fabric. It's pretty amazing. This is one of 12 that would print in 12 different colors. These are all one color that would roll and print.
Well, I'm very happy to come over to share a little bit of what I know with everyone.
Very pretty.
Actually, it's very pretty when you have the right thing.
Yeah, very nice.
This is perfect. You're absolutely right. Behind the counter. Of course, it doesn't matter for Anne.
That's right.
This is a wake up, good morning. Good morning room.
It's great.
I like that.
Beautiful. Look at that. So
I
pretty.
wish you were 13.
Yeah.
Is it for a kid's room? Oh wow. Well, this would be gorgeous for a kitchen or a sunroom too. Beautiful. Very pretty. Beautiful. Very nice. The fabrics make the room. That's for sure.